Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. We continue with the conversation, just looking at the state of the economy. Holding court this morning with Bill Okero, who is a political economist, a businessman as well. We have Bunyasi Sakwa, who's the chair of Kenya Development Corporation, the chair of Kenya, that is KEPSA Foundation, that is Engineer Patrick Obath. Also, we do have with us Professor Gituro Wanaina, School of Business, University of Nairobi. And the question that we're interrogating this morning is the government-to-government deal. Still, information is scanty. It seems to be a holy grail to just grasp the whole details that is embedded with the documents of G2G. This is what we're trying to put tails on as it is. And Jerry was a no-show yesterday. She didn't appear before the members of parliament, that is a committee on energy. And right now we understand also that MPs will be heading to Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Dubai to just put tails on the tracks of this 17 billion shilling scam that we are following. What is happening currently with that? But the question we want to interrogate right now is the fact that we have also KCB guaranteeing this G2G with an eye-popping figure of almost 500 billion shillings, and it continues apace as well. This is what is headlining the front pages of the dailies, and that raised the issue of also EPRA being now a regulator, as it is. We're given to understand that now EPRA will be has a sole responsibility and the formal power to regulate crude oil business here in the country after a bill that was proposed had been passed. So we want to interrogate this particular issue as well. But Patrick, this is where we want to get clean and understand what is happening, especially when we have a bank like KCB guaranteeing this G2G deal and many other deals of government, and we have people who have their stake in KCB as well. What is the chances of the government, which might appear to be in the doldrums, being guaranteed by KCB and not the government not honoring its payment? I hope you get to my question. I fail to understand on how I can phrase it in a very intelligent way.
No, you're not asking. I can understand the question you're asking. Let me try and give you what I think you're asking, an answer to. No, not an answer. I might just dodge it. But but what is happening here? The KCB, all they're doing is they guarantee they're holding the LCs for the government. So anything that comes in this 6-month period, right, the LCs are held by them. They're collecting all the money into an escrow account, and they should therefore after that be able to buy the dollars and pay off on the other side. Now the dollar risk in terms of the movement of the dollar against the Kenyan shilling, all that is actually being under KCB. They're the ones who have the full dollar risk in that particular area because of what they've held. So if the dollar moves rapidly like it has been moving, they're effectively receiving Kenya shillings, and you go to buy, you're buying dollars at a ridiculous rate. That will hit the bottom line at some point. So going back to, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that there's a whole other bunch of loans and things that are being done through the same organization. A lot of companies always look at concentration risk. Yeah, and if your one major customer that you're working with is GOK, right? That's a very high concentration risk for an organization like this. And that really is the issue, not about the ability to pay, whatever it is and stuff like that, is that normally any business that is being run well, you try and minimize that concentration risk so that in the event that something falls through, as a business, you're not going to fall down. Yeah? So the question I would raise, and I'd have to look at the books or the detailed books here, is what is the concentration risk that this particular organization have with government loans and government instruments that they're holding in the business? Yeah, and already when you're looking at this kind of high level of money that they're holding on behalf of the G2G, yeah, this normally would be spread across several companies, not one.
Not one.
Yeah. If I was a business person, right, I would spread this kind of thing across 4 or 5 banks, right? In the event that Imperial happens, yeah, then it's not in one place.
So, and to me, this is a very important question. looking at a bank called KCB, what will be the downside of it as a shareholder? Because as
you as a shareholder.
Yes, because what he's raising important. I'm looking at the person I'm dealing with, the level of risk in that person. And I've committed myself to this kind of guarantee here. And I know behind me there are shareholders. In the next 3 months, watch this space with KCB. It's going to evolve.
Right. The next few months.
Next 3 months.
The next 3 months.
Yeah, the dollar will come down. I'll give you free advice.
We've heard all that before.
But on a serious note,
we'll go back to 120 shillings on fuel pumps.
Absolutely. And we have seen the two, they will not happen now. We are in disaster already. But on a serious note, because you're getting information as somebody who is investing there. And that information you're getting, it makes you to do your investment decisions.
Bill Okero, it's a risky undertaking, isn't it? For an eye-popping figure like that, despite the fact that you're the greatest bank in terms of asset value, it is not a full guarantee that we don't know how many of other undertakings the KCB has actually committed to. Despite this is just what we know, yes.
I think, let me say, the government is misusing KCB. And clearly there is a risk, not just on the G2G, but on many other government, all this KNTC, duty-free postings, the Hustler Fund. And I mean, many of these government activities are being done and through KCB, and I think the risk, and banks normally are always, the main business of a bank is about risk appraisal. It's about risk, really. And if you don't really, if you put all your eggs in one basket, and knowing how the situation the government is in, particularly this one is about simply kicking the can down the road. They are not simply saying, look, instead of paying now, let's pay for this oil tomorrow. True, they don't have a Kenya shilling exposure risk because you pay for the fuel up front when it lands. At least in that regard they are. But the dollar risk, I think, as Patrick said, is a very serious concern. And the figures, being announced by the KCB yesterday, already over 3 billion. That LCs they're holding over 3.1 billion is huge. 3.2 billion is huge. So I think, yes, I think that it is a matter of serious concern. But well, I guess I think when you're dealing with government, the perception is that you always we have your back.
Yes,
you have your back. So, but I'm worried that KCB, may not be getting proper attention in central bank. Central bank governor now is a former treasury person.
Yes.
And if you don't do that work of supervising banks as required by the prudential guidelines, as openly as required, then and you do things in a manner that the government wants, I think there's a risk, financial risk, risk of financial instability in the market. So I think we need to be very careful. And this kind of things for a small country like ours, I think this is a huge risk that our financial sector should not
and we have
take easily.
We have banks which are more stronger, and my mind goes to Equity Bank, which in terms of performance, you can see how it's performing, but doesn't seem to.
But it's registered also some losses that has never happened in 7 good years. Is that indicative that we are not in a good place as well?
Sorry?
Because when I read that Equity Bank has recorded losses, despite the fact that we have these subsidiaries, but also here in the country, in the last 7 years, this has never happened. So I question myself: is it also just maybe revealing what is really happening in the?
But there's also very interesting. There's also assurance in KCB on page 22 of the Standard Business. They say the KCB assets close 2 trillion. So as you look this one in the Business Daily, you're still sound here. Don't worry.
That's what I was saying. In terms of asset value, does it?
In terms of asset value, it's okay.
And I was saying, you can't.
Is that the opportunity cost?
To turn that to assets.
Let me come in here a little bit.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think Prof has just touched on the point I was going to raise, that the $500 billion exposure that we talk about here has to be also looked at relative to something else. That's something else, the asset base. That's something else, whether it busts the prudential guidelines. It may not do any of those. It may not, in fact, bust those guidelines. It may still be within, and I think it's probably within. But the issue then is the concentration risk, which is, it is not busting, but if not handled well, there's a huge risk to moving them towards that kind of challenge they would have. Superseding the guidelines and being out of, he said, out of line, as it were. And it's what is the biggest? Is it the biggest or one of our two biggest banks and so on? And let me tell you, even their named ones have their own cans of worms that don't usually come out. I think this is probably pushing an asset that you own too far. And now this should be clear to most people if they ever had not thought about it. Why governments want shares in certain institutions, including banks? Because it's your institution. I think in KCB, government institutions own more than half.
60%.
60%. So really you can't deny them to use it as they would want, because they own that asset. But there are risks in using it. There are knockdown effects on the rest of the economy that could occur if KCB were to go under. I don't think it will go under. I do not think that about 25% of the asset value, if that is the only risk portfolio they hold, would really take them under. They will get other businesses, I'm sure, that can go their way to grow their asset base there and keep this ratio within. And I don't know how close the central bank is looking at it. It must. When I worked in a bank, both as staff and later as a director, a commercial bank, this monitoring is done daily, daily, literally. As you close your business, before the governor goes home, I'm sure he gets to know what the net situation is, or for critical institutions, the bigger ones like KCB and would be Equity and maybe others like that. So they all know about this. And I'm sure that their nerves are at breaking end, but they're just hoping that things go well. We were there before. Remember, there was a time we would not put your money in KCB. No, it wasn't one of the places to go at all. But then you had the KQs and you had a number of others and so on and so forth. Earlier, before then, you had National Bank. That was in deep trouble completely. So I hope we are not going to take KCB back there. I don't think this alone, even by virtue of its size, will take it there. For me, what would worry me is the direction of things. And my colleagues are implying that the direction is going to be to put more pressure and push it even deeper. That will be risky. But just where it is, on the numbers they are, they can be, it's a risk that you can watch carefully and manage.
Let me clarify the issue of, you see, in terms of lending, CBK has a rule in law called the per party limit. The maximum you can give in terms of credit.
Indeed, that's what I wanted to ask.
To a particular party is 25% of your capital, not asset.
Of your capital,
of
not
the
asset.
capital. And our capital of KCB is not 2 trillion. It's much less. But even if it was, we look at the asset base of 2 trillion, over 500 billion is more than 25% to one party or related parties. In this case, this transaction is one party. This Gulf grantees to this Gulf, the 3 Gulf companies, they're related. So I think even that, in my view, how they would allow KCB to give a credit, take a credit risk to one party and related parties of more than 25% of that itself is a matter that I think of concern, because that I know that is the law. You cannot, even you as an individual, take more than 25% of the share capital of that in terms of loans or credit.
That's what. Thank you for that clarification. But the question is, again, talking about the prudential guidelines and the 25% that you're putting in right now. If I have the 60% shares in that particular bank, does it give me the wiggle room to do what I'm doing? Just breaching? Have they breached the prudential guidelines that Munyasi Sako is actually putting here. So actually they are breaching it as it is, even with the central bank regulations.
I don't think it's prudential guidelines. If you're a 60%
It's
shareholder,
the law.
you're also the biggest. You're the biggest trader within the same organization.
If
I think
it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off.
It's a different risk that comes in there, where as a shareholder, you're actually pushing.
But Bilo
all
says
this
you
business in one
can't
place.
actually guarantee from the assets.
That means you're looking
you,
aside.
you need to look at the capital.
The central bank
Huh?
could turn a blind eye. It shouldn't. It's a very bad sign for the system when they know it has been breached before. So there'll be a selective implementation of the law, of the requirements. Yes, 60% can try to do what it desires, but these controls by central bank are external to that structure of ownership, and it's the central bank that ought to put its foot down and give guidance to these institutions and say no, they can, and then you won't be able to do it. But I don't think that the central bank, the way we are structured, and that would be a very, very important issue. The way we are structured, can central bank stand up and say no to government? We say that about the treasury; it should be independent, even of the executive. But does it have that kind of muscle to do that? I don't think that the central bank would stand up to government.
But we had also interesting. We had an
Previously,
interesting
maybe
discussion.
with the previous governorship.
No.
That's why I was headed. Yes.
Oh, that's where you were headed.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I think
Patrick Njoroge.
Patrick, in his own way, was almost saying no without really saying no. And if you look at his tenure, he was very unpopular with some of the people there. But I think my understanding, Patrick professionally looked at that bank. It's very interesting when you look at what the combination we have. Dungu, who helped with the CS, was a former governor. Fuge, who is the civic governor, happened to be the PS.
It's a swap. It's a swap
like
somehow of the offices.
It's like a sagas kind of thing here. And when you brought that, and have all respect for Njoroge, I know him from the university teaching there, very sober-minded, very clear. And that most people didn't like it. And when you look at that institution, I like what Mweshimiwa is saying, the central bank has a responsibility on every day to ensure how the banks are behaving. You need that kind of a very strong, independent kind of a person there. There is a time when the governor actually was not, I can't remember which particular governor, but you could see there was some laxity with certain banks. You really don't want a governor there who is pro this or pro that. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite sure right now that independence is there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So in terms of just the dollar and the way it is right now, we know, of course, there has been different jurisdictions are being affected by the price of the dollar as it is. But we can hark back and dial back to also the tenure of the current CS during the Kibaki administration. Do you sense in any way there's a bit of an artificial sort of schemes around the dollar as it is? Yes, there is a problem with the dollar, but now we're taking advantage of it. And the way it is compared to other East African countries, some artificialness also is around it. Do you sense that is what is a true reflection of what is happening, or some artificial things or a halo effect is around it as well?
Let me
becoming a
politics before the government responds.
To your right.
No,
I should get a salary for this.
I think, in my view, there is little doubt that the exchange rate mechanism has been manipulated, if I can use that word, for lack of a better, by the government to protect, or rather to maintain the external debt portfolio, stability. I think the other one is in the last 3-4 years that has been the overriding factor, because every time the shilling, the shilling value would have been something different if the government was not doing that. I can tell you for a fact, because globally the prices of raw materials and everything has gone up significantly after Corona. Petroleum prices and so many raw materials, everything went up. So the cost of imports really went up significantly. Our exports have also declined. You see what's going on in tea now. You see what's going on in coffee and all this. So tourism and all that. So I think so, because if that was to play out in the normal market mechanism, the shilling would probably be in a lot worse situation. But the government has been trying to keep this up because of the exposure on the forex. That extent, yes, the government has been playing around in that.
So this is not a true reflection of what it should be.
So.
It should be way down.
Yes,
it's just a manipulation of the government.
It's a delicate. I hear you clearly and agree fully with what Bilo has said. But this, like, what did you say? A sharp knife is only safe in the hands of a good chef. The management of the economy requires that debt be brought under a certain level of control. Risk being that when it balloons too rapidly and becomes a big share of GDP, and even a more significant share of budget, because you have to appropriate resources to pay, then it distorts a number of other things. Some of those things distorted is the parity between your currency and the external currency, and governments had always that option to devalue somewhat to enable them to meet short-term obligations. In economies which are dominated, for example, by a single commodity, take Zambia with copper, its exchange rate had always to keep in mind what impact it would have on the copper industry and either government revenues, whatever they're looking at. Nigeria at one time, the oil was maybe still the case. What oil will do, what that impact is on oil was an important thing. Now we were luckier that we had no one thing. Coffee was not that big, or tea, or any of this, so we had a diversified economy. And so we needed a healthy shilling to manage us here domestically as we relate to the outside world. But now we have got to a point where all the warnings we had around debt are beginning to come home to roost. Mm-hmm. That to meet it, we are doing all kinds of gimmicks. That the pain from the dollar is deeper than it should be. But ours is much deeper than the other countries because our debt position is very high. It would have been different if the debt position wasn't that high. Mm-hmm. So prudent management of things like this are very important. They go back to fake projects, unimplemented projects, and so on. All those get into debt. Not add on the control of budgets kinds of concern that you can't track, in fact, what the money did and exactly how much it is. I personally know that the debt register was a hodgepodge of things. Mm-hmm. And it was an embarrassing thing to even try and examine. 2.5 years ago, we were trying to get a public debt containment kind of bill. And what you got from the insiders is, hey, things are not very good here. Even the bookkeeping of it is not good. So it's that kind of mismanagement that deepens the pain. Can deepen for Kenya more than for Uganda or for Tanzania, even though we are neighbors.
So we are saddled with all these debts, and we don't know what we are paying for, apparently, because there is no clarity even from the books as it is being put here. We don't know what exactly you're paying for. The COB is coming up and telling us there's no clarity what this money was actually borrowed for, what projects. So many of them are pending. This is what the senators are actually looking. If we go even for the county government's levels, sort of the pending projects, what exactly are we paying for? If we may just itemize, maybe, and I know maybe we have done a sloppy job as journalists, right? For us to itemize that this money that we're paying for is going for this particular project, this particular tranche of money is going to offset the SGR, the Nairobi Expressway, the Kimo Rails and all that we have no sodding idea what we are paying for. Yet We are using all schemes and money.
It's not that bad. If you go to the debt management office, to their website, you can actually get a list of.
But just listening to what is a hodgepodge.
The accuracy of
you can actually get the list of the debts.
Yeah.
Saying debt from this country or from this entity is this amount for this project. That bit they will list somewhere in their whatever. But the question is now whether that money has actually been used fully as indicated for that particular project, whether that project has actually been implemented.
Exactly.
When you go through that list is when you can say, wait a minute,
Right.
I know that road.
Yeah.
It has not been done.
Exactly. That's my question.
That money may not have gone. And this is why even the other day, last week, the auditor or the controller released a report that over 2 billion was paid for commitment fees on loans that have never been taken. And this is happening every year. We're paying billions for, you sign and then that thing is forgotten. You don't follow up because there are certain things that must be done before the loan is released or realized or whatever. So yes.
Yet the commitment fee has been disbursed.
Yeah, that is normal. We pay billions every year. Billions. And last week,
and he's right.
That's a disaster.
If you take this road,
they keep signing. Every day these people travel out looking for, you hear them signing loans and things out there. Now, and their commitment fees, it's just like any other bank. You go and apply for a facility, you pay some commitment fee. You've committed this bank that you're going to borrow this amount. And then along the way somewhere, that project, or you wanted to put up in this village for political expediency or for whatever reason, may not be whatever. And so that loan is not taken. But it's there in the books. And you paid that money.
So what happens? Can we reclaim that money back?
No.
You can't reclaim?
No.
Because commitment fees.
You have embarked on a journey and there's a cost going on that journey. And you pay that cost up front.
They have mobilized money to be placed.
And Bill is right. Take this road of you're going to Naivasha from Westlands all the way to Lironi. The road looks okay when you're actually driving on it. But when you try to go the tunnels, it's rubbish.
They haven't been finished.
Nothing has been done. And I suppose it's one of the things we are paying for.
Okay.
The road is incomplete. But I think the other point we need to bring, there was an analysis we have done recently looking at the cost of roads and comparing the region. We are more expensive. You're going to the same thing, China, but ours is more expensive than the other. And that's the thing we also need to unpack. Why is ours more expensive?
Because we are rich. We are not cost conscious.
We are not just...
no, we don't look at the costs. We
don't just go in the street like beggars.
We rebased our economy.
Sorry?
Twice. We've rebased our economy twice.
We look rich.
So we are not the least developed countries around. We are over and above.
Really? I think the most unhappy.
Good example, just going back to what Bill was saying, you can get that listing of projects clearly, at least by titles. But now if you look at one of the more contentious ones in the recent past, you can take two. One is budget type support, like the Eurobond one, that many believed that it somehow disappeared in hot air, or most of it, along the way. It didn't even come into consolidated fund as the law requires. So it's that kind of thing where clearly there were commitments made, money was disbursed to help a series of things in the economy or projects, but it didn't flow that way. That was a real problem. Or alternatively, for those who like real things, take the SGR, and if you believe the critics, the SGR had a component that was people believe strongly was padded, meaning that it was actually spent, but no corresponding benefit emanating from it, because much less of it would have financed that particular benefit. But now you're spending twice as much. The extra is just money that goes into the air for others to breathe in, as it were. Those are the kinds of things that make us incapable of meeting our debt requirements, because they had no link to the performance of the economy. They didn't enter the economy. In the case of the Eurobond, remember the previous Auditor General really put in a sort of spirited effort to do many things to try and track it, and that didn't go very far. It didn't go very well either, and so on. So I think we are our own worst enemies.
Aren't we?
Yeah, so that is really.
But it's also very curious, Diba, when you see the IMF comes and saying we are going to bail Kenya because of Eurobond. It's very interesting because who is IMF? Who is Eurobond? But they are here saying yes, we'll cover you guys as far as Eurobond is concerned.
We've come in very
Cover
handy.
means I'll give you another loan. Pay that loan.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
So they cannot let their people
They renew their commitment.
not mess up.
Yeah.
They will have to get their money. So you're left here like a headless chicken. It's a country, really.
So I facilitate you. It sounds very convoluted a bit. I facilitate you to pay me back. Or when you talk about Eurobond and the Bretton Woods institutions, they're diametrically different.
Yeah, no, but
But it's like I've given you some money and you can't pay, then I give you
Let
more
us
money
be-
to pay me.
let us be realistic. If I owe you the BAL, if I owe you 1 billion shillings and you are really a pain in my neck, I'll go to Bilo. I know that he's a successful businessman. And I'll say, can you please just give me 1 million shillings now?
I need to clear this guy.
I have to clear this guy. So I get him off my back. Now I owe Bilo. And if
Fresh loan.
Yes,
It's a fresh loan.
Yes. And he'll give me some breathing space. And if I find that I'm now not able to meet my commitments to Bilo, I'll go to the professor. I say now, you know about this thing, and so I'll get.
So it's sort of you're extending your moratorium.
Yeah.
You're just kicking
death
the can
trap.
down.
We're in a death trap.
Yeah. It's a death trap actually. That
Yes.
yes.
And it needs painful decisions to get out of those kinds of commitments.
But what sort of decision can we make?
First, you have to manage your expenditure.
Absolutely.
Because revenue is not always easy to raise, either personally or even as a government, other than by taxes. Just sort of increase your inflow without raising your taxes, for example. You might of course horizontally expand the payers perhaps, but finally you must also look at your expenditure side.
Indeed.
We must, some of the things that look very good, the good highways and so on, we need them in 100 years' time for sure, but we have to do them yesterday. You do them at the pace that is sustainable. And so there are many considerations. I'm taking that as an example, but there are other gilt-edged investment that you can probably look at. And you're not even putting them sometimes in areas or for reasons that will lead to a greater impact in productivity and that kind of thing. We did the SGR at that cost. What would it have done to the upgrading of the national railway system, for example? I think only Cameroon has been able to do that post-independence, so that we reached areas that we had not reached before. What kind of spurring of economic growth will that produce? Rather than a very expensive, I'm not in any way making accurate judgment on the impact of SGR, but I know that roughly speaking, its expected benefits relative to how much we spent on it, in comparison, say, to our neighboring countries, was too much on this side. We could have done more, could have done a lot more, not stopped in Nanyuki with a rail line. We should have gone to Isiolo and gone beyond, for example. We should have gone more southerly as well, so that you can bring in the southern counties into this pre-colonial architecture that we had. We didn't do that, so that we lose opportunities for increased growth because of the choices we make. And I think in either packaging, delaying the timing, or changing the location of it can make a big difference.
All right, I wanted just also to latch on the recent, because everyone was waiting to see if EPRA will raise the fuel levies. And we saw maybe just that growing a jot down in terms of kerosene. Nothing really happened. It just kept it at what it is right now. But was that really a sting at the end of a tail? Because now we have a new proposal where we have the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill of 2023 that has been proposed in Parliament by National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, seeking to amend the Energy Act of 2019. And the bill seeks to double the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, that is EPRA, levy to a maximum of 1% from the current ceiling of 0.5%. And it says consumers are currently paying a levy of 0.25 on petroleum products and 0.08% per unit of electricity consumed. EPRA says that despite being a government agency, it does not receive any financial support from public authorities. The regulator therefore reasons that any decrease in the amount of electricity and fuel consumed will greatly cut down on its revenues, as these two products account for over 90% of its total revenue collection per annum. And all this is happening on the backdrop of a very sustained zealous public taxation by the government.
I think so. Most convoluted thinking that they have.
Isn't that a very convoluted thinking, especially where we are right now?
Yes.
And you still think of actually upping that particular levy,
Sustaining
it. Bilokero.
I think in principle we have in this forum here discussed many times that this craze or desperation about collecting revenue by any and whichever means possible has a very adverse impact on the cost of living. It's making life very expensive, and Kenyans there's been a huge uproar. For example, when they revised the fees for Ministry of Immigration, Ministry of Lands, and now it appears to be everywhere. Every ministry, every government entity,
the certificate has gone up.
Yesterday I was reading that all universities, the minister is saying will require to charge students 20,000 for registration fees. And there seems to be, and this is, I'm sure, IMF driven, that government must raise revenue by every means possible. Taxes, levies, fees, charges, whatever you call it. This is why in the budget this year they had, targeting to raise 430 billion in appropriations in aid. These are the fees and levies and charges collected by government ministries and so forth. So government exists to provide service. I have paid tax as a taxpayer so that I can provide a service. So I go to a government office. Again, I'm required to pay a fee for the same service that I have already paid through tax. It doesn't really make sense. I think Kenyans are being, we are suffering double jeopardy. We are being taxed, and at the same time we are again being charged fees in the same office, but the same public servants are supposed to provide our services. This is madness, and I think it's something Kenyans should not allow, and the courts should help Kenyans to protect the rights of Kenyans, because the Constitution is very clear. Tax should not be a burden on society. And on the public finance, on the principles of public finance is very clear on how tax should be charged. So what is happening now is crazy. Every morning you wake up, government wants to increase this or that, and so something like that, a government agency, every agency wants to collect its own fees, and every agency gets money voted for it by Parliament to run its services, and this is the money that gets misused very often. And you saw the example I mentioned earlier. Minister of Energy collected 20 billion in appropriations in aid, and then without parliamentary approval used that money. Is the issue that was being raised by the Senator Busia. So
against the law.
Yeah, I mean this is really not acceptable, and Parliament is complicit in this thing because they are approving all this nonsense, and I think they should stop it. I mean, people are complaining. This is becoming unbearable because everything you charge, you're increasing the cost of something.
Indeed. That
cost is passed on to another person, and it raises the cost.
And the profits the business are making, the salary, salary has remained stagnant, really decreased. If you bring the inflation, and it's good to correct revenue. And some of the research I'm involved right now, I'm even looking at institutions. How do you enhance your revenue, but at the same time manage your costs? And I think that's what my friend is bringing. He's saying it's good to pay, it's good to collect the taxes, but I want to see what those taxes are doing. And we have said that before here. But you correct this, but also manage your costs. That's it. And that's why you get, and in economics, and my friend is economic, you call it duo and the primo. This is the duo, this is the primo. If you do something to this, it affects the other one. Cost minimization, revenue maximization. You must have to do the two. And all what you're saying, yes, we get all these taxes on the way. Are we seeing the government we have trusted, the government we voted on 9th of October, managing itself appropriately? The other day, you told we are going to stop all this. There was a very creep, and I think most of you are in the social media, the president of Malawi. And he says, I'll start with myself. And he did it.
But cutting back on his traveling costs.
Right. Yeah. You tell us today, next day you hear you are where?
Yeah.
So there's something there we can manage. And that's something we don't need IMF. We don't need anybody. We have a conversation as ourselves as Kenyans, and the leadership take the responsibility. Yes, these are hard times. Where can we cut? So you can't talk about, I want to maximize my revenue, but all you get, it goes into some expenditure which is unnecessary. If we can manage those two, we'll be up and running.
Right. We shall be also looking at what is happening currently with the airports, but let's just see the elections at Kenya Power, where Kenya Power has announced that the deadline for the submission of nominees to fill the vacancies in the board will be Friday this week at 11 a.m. The election of the 4 directors will be done by holders of Class A ordinary shares, meaning all other shareholders but the National Treasury. The National Treasury will, on the other hand, appoint 5 directors. Kenya Power has engaged audit firm Deloitte to oversee the process and ensure transparency, given that this will be the first time minority shareholders will elect directors. Right. Gituro Wadaina, you were not anywhere gagging for this particular board membership of Kenya Power. It's good to speak while you're in so that you can go and transform.
Even if I applied, I can tell you for sure I won't get it.
Why not? Why?
And he knows,
very pessimistic.
Biro was talking earlier on, and he said the government, which he meant the earlier one. So there's some there's something misconstrued here. Some of us are not shareholders.
No.
So even if I try, my mind tells me, just don't waste your time. Don't go for it. You won't.
Usually the treasury support.
But
Is if they
critical.
Yes, critical. You can't. That class of shareholders by themselves will not pass a candidate without treasury.
So the 1 nominees, this one's, how do they come up with the nominees? First of all, is it you
nominee in a shareholder can nominate you?
Can nominate
be a director, but in the actual process of election, the major shareholders, because the
have to say. So it's not a guarantee if you're nominated, you're a nominee.
No,
actually
you
get
can
this.
be nominated, but you don't necessarily become the director.
We can nominate you for PR.
For PR sake.
For PR, but we know the bottom line. Who can't
The vote by the largest shareholders, because these are votes. It's an election.
Yeah.
Their vote is significant. So that's why I agree with him that if the government likes you and you are a minority shareholder, you will get the vote of the government. And the government says, no, not this one.
This one we know.
It's that simple.
This is trouble.
Yeah.
But the turnover.
So what is the essence of election if the government has the final say?
Not as the government, but as a shareholder.
As a shareholder.
Yeah,
As a shareholder.
As a shareholder.
As a major shareholder.
Yes.
Which is still the government.
Yeah, but they normally get the treasury one and the NSSF one and then all those vote on the same side as government.
And it's very difficult to mobilize many small ones to make them significant enough. So it's candidates who get that backing that have get the front seat on that. Yeah.
You know, we tulikuwa pahali babaya sana, you know. So when you are in now, muingie huko nyinyi.
But I think it's important that we must people, because this company has had a very large, very high turnover in the board in the last 5 years or so. I mean, there's been so many.
Which has issues,
because of the issues. There's a lot of intrigues, and sometimes you find, even in the CEO, there's been a lot of turnover in the last few years. You just read what's going on, but you know that something is happening. There was a time when, about 3 years ago, the government took an entire ministerial team to run, as you remember, led by the former Monica Juma.
Yes.
You know, the government was running the thing. Sent home so many people. It was being literally like the military taking over. But I think there is serious concern about KPLC in this country. It's affecting the entire economy, and it's sending this country down the road economically. It's really messing up everyone in this country. And it's important that the government must look at who are the people who are going, as the major shareholder, who must look at the people who are going to be on the board of that entity, if it's really keen. But if the government wants to continue playing ball and make their little funny games, then they'll put their own proxies, and the game will go on.
Indeed.
We'll still get the situation will go for bad works.
And you're right.
And that's the challenge that we have in this country. The government must really listen to Kenyans. If they indeed committed to the economy, and they promised the people of Kenya that, and they ran on that platform of economic revolution, They want to change the economy. Let us see the proof of that in the way they will nominate people to the board. Let us see people who can, the capacity to run that entity as independently as with the professional skills and competence, and people who have integrity who can run that entity. Then you can say that the government is a bit concerned about KPC. Otherwise, if you put their own little cronies, political cronies, then I can assure you, then it's clear that the government is not really concerned about making money.
It is a lot of issues with governance. And my mind goes back to when Kenya Power and Kengen, the two Joroges, they were there for some time on the board. And you could see things were happening. Very interesting, to borrow from Argentina. They just had the election over the weekend. They have chosen somebody there. And one of
guy.
Yes, sorry?
I'm confused for guy.
And he's very clear in saying that some of the things he wants to do is look at the state corporations. And he's very clear, if you're not performing, we just sell you. But they are going through a very strong due process. Because if you look, Argentina has one of the highest inflation in the world.
But even when we talk about the two Njoroges as well, we can see when we had one of them really coming to be the PS of energy, the clammy fingers also was in Kenya Power somehow, right? If you go back to the history of the IPP, the names are...
That's it. That's when the IPP came and it messed up the whole place, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. So you can that be reflective of even the tenure that you're in, you as at the helm of Kenya Power, and the getting of the IPPs, or the contractual agreements of the IPPs that you were heavily involved? How would you? How would it then say?
I think we need to separate here, and it is something we need to do in this country. Where you look, government is a national government, if you wish, and I look sagas, semi-autonomous, whatever. You look them at how they perform. For example, if you look at Kenya Power or Kengen, as they are sagas. We have the national government, but now we have, instead of giving that independence, that's why they have a board. You can make decisions on behalf of that institution, of the shareholders, government being one of the shareholders. But now you find what happened in that institution. You threw the governance out of the window and you bring the government to manage that institution. And that's why now Joroge, when he changed to be a PS, became a different ballgame, because he still had his stand in. And the purpose for a PS, from my understanding, is to ensure that the regulations, the quality control in that institution. But you leave the board and management to run that institution.
But don't you see a conflict of interest here? Is even when you come to the corporate governance itself, you jumping from being the CEO to a chair, it raises a bit of questions. Like, for instance, let's say in Standard Group that I'm the CEO today, then after now my exiting, I'm the chair of this particular company. What does the corporate governance code also, does it give a leeway that at least there should be at some time that you're off, so that it doesn't seem like you're the one who will come and cover up for the malfeasance and misappropriation that you did? Because now you have an upper hand. I can just call the CEO of that particular corporation and say, hey, please don't go that way. Because this is where we have the problem. Now you are the CEO, and then tomorrow you are appointed as a PS to manage the same sector.
You are assuming that every CEO is involved in some malfeasance and misappropriations. And there are times when a CEO has done so well,
indeed, that he has to be.
You need him after he retires as a CEO to be chairing the board, because he did so well, and the company, people want him to oversee, and we've seen that happen. But in cases where it's clear that a CEO has messed up, appointing him as chairman is obviously to cover up for his mess. That's obvious, and that happens in public service mostly. You don't see that kind of thing happening in private sector. If you mess up, you're out. You can't get anywhere near that business again. But in government, that happens because you want to cover up, and the government wants you to cover up because you know what has happened. So for government, really, that is. But for this government, my statement to this government, the situation today is different from when the Joroges were running this country. Life was still a bit bearable. Things were not as bad as they were. Today, the situation is serious. You cannot continue the way those guys were continuing. You need to change. You need completely a paradigm shift in the way you manage people, the way you appoint people, the way and otherwise we are going to sink in this hole. That one I can tell you. And people are worried. This country is headed in the wrong direction. Kenyans are asked to vote opinion polls and they say, yes, we're headed in the wrong direction. And the government keeps saying, no, we know what we're doing. You know, I was in Mombasa, this ISPA conference yesterday, and the DP... ISPA, yeah. DP says, we want to listen. But
oh yeah, he was challenging if you have good ideas.
People can, but let me tell you, people have been talking to government and the government doesn't listen. It's clear. Listening means not just asking you to send something, but you take what people have sent to you. And we saw it in the finance bill debate. They don't listen. But I think the situation is bad and they need to change. You cannot just put people there to make money. KPLC is a cash cow for government executive. It's known from the time of Moi. If you want to make billions, that is the way you start from. Procurement of all those things of KPLC. KPLC now is dead. You apply for a transformer, you will wait for years. You pay a tip, you can get something fixed.
Yeah.
You pay money privately, you can get something connected. Officially, you are told this thing is not available. It's dying entity. And it's because of the interference by the government and executive in the way they appoint people. Everybody who's important there gets connected to someone in government. And they are working for people. And I think so. We need to change that entity completely. Otherwise, it will mess up the economy of this country.
Right. And talking of listening, who do we listen to right now? Because concerns have been raised over the billions of shillings that had been allocated by the national and county governments to mitigate the effects of floods currently ravaging the country. A back and forth has ensued between the national and county governments in what is now turning into a war of words regarding the funds. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua at the heart of a storm over his contradicting statements, and we have Jeff Kirui just putting this into perspective.
Na mimi mnajua ni mtu ya kusema ukweli. Na sisi katika National Treasury tumewachilia pesa kwa gavana zaidi ya shilingi bilioni 10 iko pale, na tunataka wananchi walishwe na wachungwe mambo yao.
The statement by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua on Tuesday in Mombasa has seemingly rubbed governors the wrong way. The Council of Governors now say they have not received any money from the national government to mitigate the effects of El Nino.
To date, we wish to state and clarify that county governments have not received any allocation from the national government to go towards mitigation measures for El Nino.
Despite authoritatively saying that the money had been disbursed, 24 hours later, the DP has changed tune.
We are therefore a little bit shocked when we see governors complaining that they are yet to receive money for El Nino from the national government. Such money is not forthcoming. They are expected to use emergency money within their financial provision and to reallocate money within their budget to intervene for the people that they govern.
A situation setting the national government and the county governments on a coalition course as governors accuse the national government on reneging on the commitment to facilitate counties with 10 billion shillings to mitigate the effects of El Nino.
Serikali ya Kenya Kwanza ni serikali ya unafiki, na sifa za munafiki ya kwanza ni mwongo. Yani ulimi ile ni laana, kila siku wakiongea ni uongo mtupu. Sifa ya pili ya mnafiki ni ya kwamba akitoa ahadi hatimizi.
In September, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua chaired a stakeholders meeting where the government estimated that it would require about 10 billion shillings to manage the effects of El Nino. The Council of Governors, on its part, estimated that the county governments had projected 15 billion shillings. The national government, through the Deputy President, now says they will offer support to counties through the county coordination teams co-chaired by county commissioners and governors.
The national government will provide funds through the county coordination teams. The development partners and humanitarian agencies will do the same, and we expect the county governments to do the same.
In August, the Meteorological Department issued a warning on the impending El Nino. But a month later, the head of state, President William Ruto, dismissed the possibility of an El Nino.
Mmesikia wale watu wamesema tena
ile El Nino haitakuweko. Wamesema kutakuwa tu na mvua kubwa, lakini haitafika pale ya kuharibu. Sisi tunamshukuru Mungu jameni.
Even as President Ruto attributed his information on downscaling the El Nino rains to the Meteorological Department, the department has disowned the statement. The director of the Meteorological Department, David Gikungu, says he does not know who gave President William Ruto false information that the department had downscaled its El Nino alert. In the meantime, Kenyans continue to face the wrath of El Nino rains across the country, with at least 10 dead, thousands left homeless and without access to essential commodities such as food and medicine, exposing the government's lack of coordination. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
If there was a face of government, this is how it looks, as it has been personified there by Stano. It is double-faced, as you can see. I gave the county government Kenya shillings, hundreds of millions to deal with El Nino. This is what the national government is saying. I have not received any money for the El Nino crisis. And remember also, there was a 4-on-1 that the national government had disbursed 10 billion shillings to the county. And this is what the deputy president had actually earlier said. Now today he's saying it is the preserve of government to the county government to deal with their own affairs as far as El Nino is concerned. And what were we doing? Well, in terms of preparation, right? Prophet Noah had actually spoken, prepare ye, prepare ye, prepare ye. El Nino is on the way. El Nino, build your ark, you counties. Now this is how the ark is looking. And we have floods rising right now. It's pocked by those holes all over. El Nino Preparedness Fund, where is the money? We take a short break. When we circle back, we'll continue with more. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime.